All right, now this video is going to be something a bit different. It's not about content, it's about how you answer the questions on each GCSE paper. And this video is going to start with paper 1, the medicine paper, Medicine Through Time. Now, this paper is broken down into 2 sections. Section A is all about the Western Front, 16 marks, 10%. And then you've got Medicine Through Time, which is worth 20% at 36 marks. This paper is made up of 6 questions in which you will have 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete. Now, this is the first exam you will usually sit, and it is a challenge in regards to the amount of questions you're expected to answer in such a short space of time. So what questions will you be getting in this paper? Section A, the first question will be describe 2 features. The next question will be how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into something. And the last question is a 4-marker looking at how you could follow up a source to find out more about. The Western Front section you should only spend 15-20 minutes on. 20 minutes probably being the better time. The Medicine Through Time section is the heavier weighted section, so it's important that you give yourself a good 55 minutes to do this section. It's made up into 3 questions. Now, the first question is a nice 4-marker explaining the similarity or difference between 2 time periods. The second question is an explain why question, 12-marker. And the third question is a choice of 2 questions, how far you agree, 16-mark question with 4 spag marks. So we're going to go through section A first. Now, the first question is describe 2 features. So the way to be successful in this question is to not spend too much time on it, and also don't overwrite. Now, what the examiners are looking for here are 2 extended facts with lots of keywords. Now, if you look at the example that I've given you here, this is a 4 out of 4 answer. It is very easy to get 4 out of 4 on this response if you are showing that you know good facts. So the question here was describe 2 features of ill health among soldiers that arose from trench environment. And this candidate has written 1 feature of ill health among soldiers was trench foot. That's going to get them the 1st mark. This was due to them standing in muddy water and not drying their feet. This can get worse and cause gas gangrene and your feet go black. That's the 2nd mark. It's an extended fact, nice and easy. A 2nd feature of ill health is trench fever. That's the 3rd mark. This was spread by lice and caused soldiers to be weak. It was caused due to trenches being dirty and filled with rats which carried lice, causing soldiers to be ill. That's their 4th mark. 4 really easy marks to get. It's important that you keep focused on the question and you use lots of key specific factual detail. Don't overdo this question. Don't spend ages on it. Don't write pages and pages, because at the end of the day, it's only worth 4 marks. Now, question 2A on section A is probably one of the more difficult questions, because the expectation is that you will have 15 minutes to look at 2 sources and analyse them. So the question is, how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry? Now, what this basically means is, how useful are these sources for you as a historian to learn about a topic? So last year's question was about how useful sources A and B were for the work of stretcher bearers on the Western Front. The key success criteria with this question is, number 1, you must do both sources. It's important. You are judged based on some skills here. You're judged on looking at the knowledge. You're judged on your contextual understanding, and you're judged on understanding the provenance as well. Keep to the inquiry. Focus on stretcher bearers. Or focus on what the exam question asks you. Focus on what the question is asking. At the end of the day, how useful are those sources for you? Don't spend too long looking at less useful. Focus on useful in the first instance. You should never in this question say what the source doesn't show you. That's a waste of time and it goes against the question. So the way in which we structure this is COP. So you look at the content. What does source A teach you? What does it show you? Now, with your content, you must back it up with a quote or description. So the thing with this part of the question is you're basically making an inference. So you make an inference and support it. Then you support it with your own knowledge. My own knowledge supports this. Now, you don't need a massive amount of knowledge. You're looking at 3 to 4 lines of specific knowledge to support it. And we're going to look at an example in a minute. The one that people tend to stumble on is the provenance. Now, the provenance is that title of the source. So you might have a diary entry written by Captain John Smith, who was writing on the front line in 1915. You need to assess how useful that is. Okay? So there's 3 key questions that I think will really benefit. Now, you only really need to talk about one really detailed piece of provenance. My advice would be for this question is to look at the provenance and say what's useful about it and explain why. And then if you wanted to talk about something that's less useful. So we're going to look at the example, but the 3 questions that I think are going to be very useful for a source question are the type of source. Is it useful? Why? Don't just write, yes, it's useful because it's a photo. Explain to the examiner why a photograph might be useful for a historian learning about this topic. Is the date of the source useful? Why? Now, in this unit especially, you must consider what was going on at the time. So, for example, if you saw if it was a question about medical advancement and you saw men lying in a tent in 1917, you might say it's less useful because you know that by this time there was more development in things such as base hospitals to be able to treat the patient. You might say that you're quite surprised about a source because the date of the source, you know that a certain battle was going on. Really focus on what was happening at the time. Remember, this part of the course is only 4 years and it's a very small part of the course. Then what the examiners really like to see is, why has the source been created? Is that useful? Has the source been created to make people feel reassured? Has it been made to create a sense of calm? Has it been created to make the government look better? Just really focus on that, okay? Now be careful with the provenance. You cannot just say a generic statement. The provenance of source A is useful because it's a photo is useful. You can't say that. You've got to explain it. So what we've got here is an example of an 8 out of 8 response, but I've only shown you one source. Source A is useful. Now, as I go along, I'll tell you where the content is, the own knowledge, and the provenance. It is quite obvious where it is. Okay? So, content. Source A is useful for an inquiry into the work of stretcher bearers because it shows it is a very difficult and tiring job. The quote to show this is that it was awful work getting them out of the shell holes. This bit here is all the content. Nice, easy, to the point. My knowledge to support this is that there were 16 stretcher bearers per 1,000 men in the Western Front. This emphasised how tiring it was, and the uneven terrain through shelling made the ground even worse. That is their own knowledge. The provenance of the source is useful because it was written by a captain in 1915. A captain had a status at war, so was respected, which shows authority from his title. Although in 1915 it was the Second Battle of Ypres. This shows the provenance is useful because there were a lot of British casualties, around 100,000 at Ypres. Now what this candidate's done here is they've used their own knowledge in the provenance, which you can do. However, the provenance is less useful because it's a letter. This is bad. I mean, be careful using words such as bad, because it won't show the severe brutality of the war, as soldiers don't want some family to scare family members back home. This is all the provenance. Real clear structure, to the point. Okay? That's how you should be doing the source questions. If you just did the content and own knowledge for both sources, you might come away with half marks. If you did the provenance really well, then you're looking at the higher marks, the 6 to 8 marks out of 8. Just be aware that this question is very challenging. Don't just copy what the source says, try and put a little bit of knowledge in it, and try, if you're at the top end of this GCSE, to really focus on whether the provenance is of use to us as historians. Remember, that's an 8 marker. It is bonus marks to a degree, but it's good to develop your source skills. Question 2B is another one that's very difficult. Now, I know some exam boards have this as a much more extended question, but in the Edexcel paper, how would you follow up a source to find out more about? It's a bit like in lesson when we tell you to look at a picture and we say to you, what questions have you got about this? What do you want to know? It's exactly what this question is. And there's 4 parts of this question. So the actual question is, how could you follow up source A to find out more about the work of stretcher bearers on the Western Front? It's a 4 marker and it comes in marks, 1 mark each, okay? So you've got to pick a detail in the source that you would follow up. Remember, it's got to be about stretcher bearers. It can't be about something random. So the first thing, you've got to pick a quote or description in the source that you would find out more about. It must be about the topic. So this candidate has said, altogether, we had collected 18 men in a single day. That's their quote. The next thing, what question would you like to find out more about? You do this in everyday life, asking questions. So write a question that you'd like to know more about as a historian. In lesson, you're asking me, sir, why this, why that? This person's written, how many men did they collect to? How many men did they collect and take to the RAP in 1915? Very clear, to the point. If you do those 2, you get a mark each. Brilliant. Now, what type of source I could use? Now, as historians, we don't just know about history. We've got to use sources to build our knowledge. Especially for things like the war, people have found out about the medical conditions because of first-hand accounts. But with this question, the type of source must be from the time. So you can't just say medical records or a diary entry. It has to be specific. So this candidate has literally just written medical records from the RAP in 1915. It's got to be a specific source that could be used at the time. No one in that source should be saying Google, books, or their teacher, because Google wasn't around then. Okay, books weren't around then. And no matter how much people might like to see it, I definitely wasn't around in World War I. So it's about developing it further. And then your last bit, explain how might this help me help answer the question. Explain how that source helps you answer your question. A very few brief lines. This person's written, it tells you why and how people got there due to how severe their injury was. 4 marks, nice and easy. Okay. Now this is a lot of, we do about 10 to 12 lessons on the Western Front, and it's not much content for one big thing. Now this person is the same person this exam, and they got full marks on the Western Front section. Spent about 20 minutes on it, okay? That's section A of paper 1. Section B is the heavier weighted section for this GCSE. It's about the medicine through time course. So this is worth 36 marks, and it's worth a bigger chunk. It's worth 20% of this paper. This is the side that people tend to find easier, but the problem is over the last 2 years, people have tended to spend too much time on section A, which means their section B struggles. So I'm going to go through each question. The first question, explain a similarity or difference between 2 time periods. So this question, you're going to be asked to compare cause, treatment, prevention, or care. You must get your time periods right. That's one of the biggest problems. People get the wrong time periods, and it really does struggle. Spend about 5 minutes on this again. It's a 4 marker. It should be easy to get 4 out of 4, but don't overwrite. Don't spend too long. Use the lines provided. So this candidate got the question. Explain one way in which ideas about the cause of illness in the years 1700 to 1850 were different from the ideas about cause of disease in the years 1900 to present. It's a comparison for 2 time periods, and this person has written, in the years 1700 to 1850, the cause of illness was the theory of miasma. This was the idea that bad fumes in the air were the cause of illness. People believed this cause, as big industries had lots of fumes which you could see and smell, so it seemed logical. 2 marks, perfect. However, in the years 1900 to present, the cause of illness was through lifestyle factors, for example, smoking and diet. If you smoke, it could cause lung cancer or gum disease, and a poor diet can lead to obesity or type 2 diabetes. They've made a comparison and they've showed the change. Just make sure with this response that you are comparing and you have specific facts about each time period which are very clear to the examiner. Also, look at the dates very carefully. In this question in particular, a lot of people wrote for 1700 to 1850 germ theory. That's wrong. Germ theory wasn't until 1861. So be careful to look at your dates and know what event happened when. The next question in paper 1 is the one that comes up in every paper in the GCSE, the explain why question. Now this is an easy win if you follow the structure. So some schools go down the bog standard 3-point evidence explain link route. We take it one step further and we try and encourage you to do 3 lots of evidence explain. But if you don't have time to do 2 lots of evidence explain. Now with this question, you get bullet points, and these are known as stimulus points. In my opinion, only write about them if you can actually form a very strong paragraph on them. Don't write about them if you don't know anything about it. Likewise, don't just write about the bullet points. This will limit your mark to at least 7. You need to be talking about 3 things in the 12 marker, okay? It is a 3-paragraph response. You need to spend about 15 to 18 minutes on this response, and if one paragraph is much shorter, it's absolutely fine. You don't have to do 3 lots of evidence explained for every paragraph. It's just the key thing with this response is you're giving good evidence and rewording the question over and over. So the question that came up last year was explain why there were improvements in medical knowledge in the years 1500 to 1700. This candidate here very cleverly identified Renaissance, and in the little box they've done a little plan. They've written about what they're going to talk about. This is an example of one of their paragraphs, and it said one reason why there was improvement in medical knowledge in the years 1500 to 1700 was Vesalius. Vesalius is not in these bullet points, they're talking about their own thing. What I like about this response is that the candidate straight away rewords the question in their first sentence. Then they give us some evidence. So let's have a look at the evidence part. For example, he proved Galen theories wrong over 300 times. He proved that both men and women have ribs and the jawbone is made of 1 part, not 2. That is the person's evidence. This was an improvement as theories believed by everyone were proved incorrect. That is all they've done for explanation. All right, but it's not a bad overall. Okay, that's their first evidence explained. Then we're going to look at the next evidence explained. Another reason is Vesalius wrote a book called The Fabric of the Human Body. This told people about anatomy findings. This was good, right? That bit there is their evidence. And then this was good. I mean, they've not reworded the question there, but they're definitely answering it, as it quickly made people aware of new anatomy ideas through a book. And then lastly, a final reason is his ideas were believed by many other scientists and the Royal Society, so the church lost control and Galen's theories were starting to be removed and replaced by Vesalius's. I mean, that's very much a more evidence. There's very little explanation there. But then they go on and finish with a link. Overall, Vesalius is why there was improvements in medical knowledge. Once again, they've reworded the question. Because he proved Galen wrong, which was a belief for over 2,000 years and even believed by intelligent individuals like physicians. Really clear response, gives point evidence explain. That's 1 paragraph out of 3. This is how you should be looking at doing your 12 markers as an effective form of structure. Now, this is the last question. This is the one that people tend to get a little bit worried about. Now, in the medicine paper, actually in medicine paper and the Richard and John paper, you'll have a 16 marker. The only difference is that this one has SPAG. You'll get a choice of 2 questions. Okay, don't do both. Okay. Another key thing is don't leave this question blank. If you feel more comfortable doing the 20 marker first, do it first. Okay. Don't do both because you won't do them properly. Read both questions carefully and really think about what you think you can answer more effectively. Don't just see a question, see a word and go crazy. Really read the question about what it's asking. And like I said in the last question, don't just write about the bullet points. You've got to write about at least 3 things. Okay? And that's how our structure allows you to. So the first thing you should do is agree with the statement. Give 3 detailed reasons why you agree and explain how it links to the question. So basically, 3 lots of evidence explained. It's also really good, and this is the, the real top end, give ranking to your knowledge. How important is that fact to the question? This evidence is very strong in the reason why there was ineffective care and treatment in the years 1250 to 1500. Then at the end of the agree paragraph, overall, what's the strongest piece of evidence for the question and why? And what's the weakest piece of evidence for the question and why? Really think about that. Don't just do it as a robotic answer. You genuinely got to say why you think it's a strong piece of evidence and a weak piece of evidence. Then you disagree. Okay? Give 3 detailed reasons why you disagree and explain how it links to the question. Okay? Give ranking to your knowledge. How important is that fact to the question? And then overall, strongest evidence and why, and weakest evidence and why. Now, we have been told in the past that if you do a really good agree paragraph with a conclusion, you could still get the top marks. But because it's a how far do you agree question, I really think that you should go down the route of agree and disagree. Your conclusion is what really bumps you up. Now, the way we do conclusions is Gion. So I just want you to imagine that I've got a question that says that burgers are the best food. How far do you agree? Your judgment. Answer the question. In conclusion, I think burgers are the best food. E. Explain why. Why are burgers the best food? Give 2 or 3 sentences. O. On the other hand, look at other reasons. Look at other foods. Well, actually, on the other hand, I think pizza's all right because of this. And then nevertheless, go back to your beginning judgment and finish with a mic drop piece of evidence. Wow the examiner with a real good fact at the very end. Nevertheless, I think this because. That's how you do the 16 marker, and it's all about practice. It's more important that you have an argument throughout. So I'm going to show you a 14 out of 16 response, okay? And just to show you, I mean, I personally think this would have got, this is 16, but in the real thing, they got 14. I'm going to show you why this is a very good response. So I strongly agree that the main reason why medical care and treatment was ineffective in the medieval period was due to Galen's ideas. They've given me their first point here. For example, the church strongly supported Galen's ideas, so if you tried to challenge him, you were also challenging the church and God, which was seen as sinful. This was bad in the medieval period, as many Christians believed heaven was the ultimate goal. Another reason why the church agreed with Galen's ideas about the soul and anatomy. The church banned dissection in this period, so no one could challenge him. However, Roger Bacon was jailed for attempting to challenge Galen's ideas and the church. The final reason why medical care and treatment was ineffective was due to Galen, because all libraries and education was run by the church. This meant everyone in the medieval period was taught about Galen and didn't have any other medical knowledge, as it was seen as sinful and disrespectful to God. Overall, the main reason why medical care and treatment was ineffective was due to Galen's ideas, because in the medieval period, most people were religious, so if they went against the church, they would go to hell, and Christians would go straight to heaven, wanted to go straight to heaven. The only advice for this bit is for them to really develop the more wording in the question. But then they go on. On the other hand, I disagree because of the government. This is because the government took taxes off people but didn't use any of them to improve or help medical knowledge. Good. Another reason is respect for tradition. They talked about 3 things they can hopefully access at the top level. People in the medieval period were not open to any new ideas, as they strongly agreed with and respected Galen due to the church. Also, physicians were taught Galen's theories and used them. This meant people thought they were correct, or this made people think they were correct, as physicians were respected and intelligent individuals. A final reason why medical care and treatment was ineffective was due to hospitals. This is because they focused on care, not cure. I mean, it's just a brilliant answer. In conclusion, I strongly agree that Galen's ideas were the main reason why medical treatment, because the church had control of Galen's ideas, so anyone who went against them said they would go to hell. On the other hand, the government, respect for tradition, and medieval hospitals were the main reason why medical care and treatment was ineffective. Nevertheless, I agree Galen's ideas were the main reason, because it is all medieval people knew, as all they were taught by Galen's ideas in education and through books at libraries. Really strong answer. The ranking probably isn't there the way it should be, but to get 14 out of 16 and 4 out of 4 stag, really good. The spelling's not perfect in places, but the key thing is that they focus on the historical keywords. So just make sure you're spelling the Galens, Hippocrates, you know, physicians, all of those aspects correctly to get you those 4 spag marks. So overall, this is how you do paper 1. It's a really, you know, the way in which we do it. Other schools might do it differently, but it's really important that you develop the structure as it's proven to be successful over the last few years.